everybody, it's Doug Green, and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News, and we're back with Gerry Christensen, who's the associate founder of ICA AI. Gerry, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, hey, Doug, it's great to be here, and we are back from the MVNO show in Miami, which I'd like to talk to you about some.
Well, we're going to dive right into that. It sounds like there was some interesting news that came out of that show. I think we'll give people a little bit of taste of the panel that you were on and some of the other information. But also, you've got like a lot of news coming out of ICA AI itself. So let's start there. What is ICA AI?
Yeah, first of all, what is ICA AI? ICA AI is a company, and as it's displayed on the video here, it's ICA space AI. And the origins of the name is the ICA part is Intelligent Communications Assistant. So fundamentally speaking, we're a technology and infrastructure company that has an AI-based approach to things. And that AI-based approach is largely leveraging deterministic AI, which for your watchers and listeners from last time, if they've seen or heard that podcast, they would know that deterministic is different than the typical AI models that rely on probabilistic determination of things. Deterministic is more black and white, and we feel that it's a much better approach, not only from a scalability and cost perspective, but also it has a lot greater efficacy, especially for certain industry verticals where privacy and security is really important, like financial services and healthcare and legal and so forth. And so it just so happens that I had a couple of colleagues at the MVNO show, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. They were with me at the show. I did moderate a panel, which I'll also talk about. And it was a really good event. It was only the second time that they've had this event in Miami. It's a much bigger event in Europe. Like if you see, it's called MVNO Nations. And if you see their show that they have in Europe, there's hundreds of sponsors. Here, there were just dozens. And I'm sure it's much larger in Europe, but we had a really good contingent there, and we actually did learn quite a few things. And I'd like to get into that today with you, if that works for you.
Let's dive into that, because let's give people a taste of what went on. So the first thing I heard is you were on a panel.
Yeah, and the way that worked out is I've got a market research company, Mind Commerce, which is relatively resting fallow right now. I don't do too much with it, but occasionally for certain events we sponsor, and we happen to sponsor this event. We were a media partner. And I asked the folks there, I said, hey, if we're a media partner, could I either speak or moderate a panel? And they said, sure. Serendipitously, I didn't even ask for this. They said, yeah, we would like for you to moderate a panel on how the MVNO ecosystem could leverage AI for differentiation. It was very serendipitous because I immediately thought of ICA. And the other thing that was serendipitous too, as part of that, not only did I get to attend the show at no cost, but I had two different folks that I could invite. So one of the people that I invited was our CEO and founder, Ray Shepard. So him and another colleague by the name of Tim Annis were there, and the three of us walked around a lot, talked with a lot of folks, and we got a lot of insights that I'd like to share with your listeners today.
Let's hear about them.
All right, so first of all, the MVNO ecosystem is alive and well. And for folks that don't know it very well, you have not only the mobile virtual network operators, the MVNO themselves, that rely on the underlying MNOs, mobile network operators, but you also have something called an MVNA, which is an aggregator, and an MVNE, which is an enabler. So the aggregators, the MVNAs, typically they contract with Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and aggregate minutes of use and other resources, and then essentially act as a reseller to the MVNOs. MVNEs, they provide the infrastructure services so that an MVNO doesn't have to do that themselves. So we talked to all three different types of organizations, and we learned a lot of things. For example, one of the things I heard while I was there is that some MVNOs that are currently the so-called light MVNO, where they rely on everything from the MVNE, and that would include things like the VoIP infrastructure. Some of those folks are looking to become heavy MVNOs. They're looking to be full stack or have their own VoIP platform. And so that's one of the things that I've been looking into as a result of that is what types of VoIP platform services like session border controllers would be best suited for them. But honestly, I spent most of my time on AI, and that was my reason for being there. And here's the things that we talked about on the panel and subsequent conversations around the exhibit floor. We talked about how can you leverage AI for operations and administration? How can you leverage it for certain specific use cases that are really important to MVNOs? One of them that we talked about was international roaming, and how from a customer care perspective, you can use AI to guide folks towards the most efficient use of eSIM for making sure that you keep your costs down when you're roaming internationally. That was a really good one. Another one was how can you use AI from a robocall mitigation perspective? That's something that I've talked about in the past. And we also talked about things like, does it make more sense for the MVNO to use the so-called hyperscalers? That would be, the big guys that we know, the Googles, the Metas, and so forth, or just do things on a DIY basis, and that could be on-prem or it could be in the cloud. And the jury's out there. There's advantages and disadvantages of both. So we talked about that. Interestingly, one of my panel members brought up deterministic AI. And we had a prep call prior to the panel, and I swear I did not spoon feed him this. His name is Harveer Singh, and he runs his own MVNO. And he, on his own, said, "Oh yeah, deterministic AI is really important, especially for financial services and for other companies that really need to have security." So I'll be following up with him. But one of the things that we were looking to achieve, and we made good progress on, was seeking out opportunities for companies to try the application in the MVNO space. We've already made a lot of headway with UCaaS providers. We've got a couple that are coming on very shortly. And so I wouldn't be surprised the next time we talk or sometime soon, I'll be able to actually, maybe we do a demo online, Doug. I don't know.
That'd be cool.
Person at some point. But in addition to working with UCaaS providers, we expect that MVNOs are going to be users of this application as well. And if you want, I could give your listeners a refresher of what that solution is and how it works and so forth.
Sure, but do it. Yes, please.
So one of the important points about this is to think of it as a solution that's one of the many tools to mitigate unwanted robocalls or unwanted calls of any type. They don't have to be robocalls. And because when I think of a robocall, I think of an automated call. Some of these calls that you don't want are actually from a person. They're not necessarily robotically generated, and they're not necessarily conversational AI, although I'm a big proponent that with conversational AI picking up steam, that people are going to want to have AI answering calls for them, and that would be AI talking to AI. So that's part of what we do. But the other part of what we do that I think is a really good fit with the robocall mitigation ecosystem is we establish a trust score, and it's on a deterministic basis. So look at things like, does this telephone number that belongs to Doug Green, is it a telephone number that I've ever engaged with before? How long have I talked to that number, et cetera, et cetera. We also integrate things like identity and reputation score from external resources, external places. But by and large, we have our own way of dealing with things, which is totally independent from the transport layer. So in other words, we take advantage of stir shaking when that information is available. But let's say for the sake of argument, a call comes in that our AI solution manages, and let's say it hits one of those proverbial TDM SS7 holes. So it strips the token. We don't have the information there. We can't take advantage of the identity information. We have a solution that stands alone and works on its own, so that we can still handle that even in that eventuality. The solution itself can integrate either tightly with the infrastructure like the UCaaS operators or an MVNO, and it doesn't matter whether they're a light MVNO or a heavy MVNO, we can integrate tightly with their infrastructure, or we can sit as what's called a progressive web application, a PWA, which means we sit in a cloud. And when a call comes in, it comes in essentially to the cloud. It doesn't come to the infrastructure, it goes to the cloud. The cloud then sends asymmetrically a notice to the handset to wake it up and say, hey, you've got a call coming in. it causes, from a UI perspective, a card to pop up which presents a bunch of options. One of those options could be, hey, you got a call from this number. Do you want to answer it? Or maybe it answers it for you if it doesn't trust it to interrogate it. And by the way, in that option, the one I just mentioned, it doesn't even have to necessarily go over the native voice channel. It can use something called WebRTC or a WebSocket to do voice over data, where it doesn't have to go over, for example, the native LTE or 5G channel. And that has advantages and disadvantages, not the least of which is if we do it that way, then we can completely avoid the possibility of a spam flag, like a label that says spam or that kind of thing. We do have solutions if we do go through the native channel to deal with that as well. And part of that is just simply registering with the analytics engines. So those are the couple ways that we can integrate, and we are integrated with UCAS, and we're about to integrate with some MVNO providers as well. And again, we feel that this is highly complementary to the other solutions that are already out there. There's a lot of talk right now about branded calling. You've had some of those conversations on your podcast. And I think it's also very relevant to keep in mind the FCC's notice for proposed rulemaking, the NPRM, on identity. So it's quite possible that if that proceeding goes through the way it's currently written, that stir shaken will be very important when it comes to identity. And in fact, they'll probably use the metadata, the payload and the claim information, the rich call data, to transmit the information so that, number one, you can get A-level attestation, and number two, ideally transmit the name of who's calling you. And that's also useful to us because that can influence the trust score. Because let's look at a scenario, Doug. Let's say you want to transact with a company that's not in your contact list, and maybe they've never even called you before. Most likely, if you get a call from them, you're not going to recognize the number, and the system's not going to recognize the number without ICA AI, that is. And maybe even worse, maybe an analytics engine might label that as spam because maybe they don't recognize the number, or based on the behavior of it, they think it could be spammy. Well, we can turn that around by using ICA to know that that is actually a trusted call. And instead of it being labeled, instead of it being blocked or otherwise redirected, that call would actually go through as if Doug Green was calling Gerry Christensen, a completely known and trusted call. So those are some of the things that we're implementing. Does that all make sense to you? Any questions about that or follow-ups that you'd like to get into deeper?
Well, one big one, Gerry, why is this a step forward?
Well, big picture, first of all,
right.
I have kind of a love-hate relationship with AI. I'll be perfectly honest about it. It's been highly disruptive, and maybe it's just because, the gray hair or whatever, reluctance to change and that kind of thing.
You at least have hair.
Well, I don't know. If you look at the top of my head, I know that's arguable. But it's been highly disruptive, and it's changed some things. It's certainly changed the livelihood for some people. So it's really adapt or I was going to say adapt or die. That's pretty dramatic, but it's pretty much adapt or your outcomes are not positive, right? So you got to be flexible and adaptive. So one of the big picture adaptive things to consider is, especially in the age of agentic AI, where conceivably you could have anything from just annoying calls to using social engineering to trick you and make you think it's Gerry and try to steal credentials from you or something like that, to maybe the worst of all could be a distributed denial of service attack where it's agentic AI placing a whole bunch of calls. So at the 50,000 foot level, I think that there needs to be at least some level of AI looking at the network and in essence managing all calls at some level. I'm a strong believer of that unless it's clearly a human-to-human call where Doug is calling Gerry and we have some discernment, some way of identifying that, where maybe Gerry just answers it. No AI involved with that at all. We know through identification that it is definitely Doug. It's not a spoof call. We have some means of identifying that, let's say this is getting really deep, but some way of identifying that your handset's actually in use, that kind of thing, as opposed to a dialer, right? Mm-hmm. Dialer traffic. And this is not to disparage telemarketing. Telemarketing uses dialers. Most of it is legitimate in the sense that it's not fraud. A lot of it is legitimate in the sense that not only is it not fraud, but it's also not unlawful. But some of it's unlawful. It's TCPA violations, telemarketing sales rule violations. And on top of that, agentic AI and the fact that you've got conversational AI, I'm a firm believer that in the future, you're going to have a ton of AI talking to AI, because you're going to have a dialer doing telemarketing, again, hopefully consensual, legitimate, that's using AI. So you, Doug, I'm just saying this, and look at my crystal ball. You mean save the date here and look at it 5 years back. You're going to want to have AI answering most of your calls, period.
Right.
Because most of your calls are not going to be Gerry calling you. You know, it's going to be some machine calling you. So whether that's ICA AI or anybody else, I think that's just going to be a fact of life. So we feel like we're riding the wave, and we may be riding in front of the wave, because if you look at it, there's not a lot of options out there. There's a very short list. I don't want to mention her name, but we chatted about one of them before we got on this podcast. And I'm a firm believer that, rising tide makes all boats go up. So if somebody wants ICA AI, great. If they want to try somebody else, that's fine. We got a bunch of patents on what we do, deterministic AI, but we're not being ogres about it. We don't intend to be a patent troll. We're not going to be a non-practicing entity. We're actually on the verge of practicing. We're going to have this live very soon. So it's more from a protective perspective, although we feel that we've got a strong grounds for licensing those patents too. So there could actually be some folks out there that already have a solution that's maybe somewhat similar that could see some benefit in licensing our patent down the road. But we do plan on offering this, and getting back to the MVNOs, the whole basis of this conversation, we see a strong differentiator for them. Because if you think about it, MVNO, do they really want to differentiate only on price? There's crazy thin margins with the MVNO ecosystem. I already knew that going into this event in Miami, but I heard it over and over again, because you got the underlying carrier, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile in the United States, and you got the MVNO. So if they don't have a value-added service like ICA AI to differentiate, then how do they differentiate themselves other than price? So it's a rhetorical question. So I really feel that UCaaS in particular and MVNOs really need this. Possibly CCaaS for inbound management of calls too. Interestingly enough, a lot of call centers get robocalls, and it's not because they're targeting the call center; they're just random. So one way of dealing with that is to front end them with AI, so that you identify that it's a call that you don't want. So for an inbound call center, this could also be a very useful tool for them as well. So I probably told you more there than you needed to hear, but that's it.
Well, as we close up our let's just talk about this for just a second. You had a lot of success apparently at the show. You even had a interest from overseas companies and so on.
Yeah, indeed. We heard the same thing over and over again, that companies they're all doing something with AI, and it's just a matter of where they place their bets. And from what I heard, there was pretty good decision making in terms of where the greatest ROI is. I think I heard some really good implementation of things where they already knew they had some pain points. And so they were just automating things that they're already doing, just making it better, saving money. UX was a common theme, improving user experience. And ICA AI resonated with all of that, because not only does it improve user experience, but it's also, from an ROI perspective, a really good place to place your bets, because it can be implemented in a way where, you don't need to forklift in some new piece of equipment. It integrates with what you're already doing, and it has immediate positive impact on the bottom line, because it's something you can actually charge for. I don't want to tell you the exact price points we heard, because I don't want to signal our competitors. But one of the things we learned is we narrowed down the price point for the willingness to pay on this. And the good news is there's a solid willingness to pay for it, where we believe that end users will pay a little bit extra per month to have a superior way of managing their incoming calls. So all that's really positive.
Well, Gerry, as always, I'm happy that we were able to do this. You've opened the door to more conversations, which we're going to have. And I'm going to put you on the spot and say on this podcast, we're gonna start to up the cadence of our podcasts here on the ICA AI story. I've just put a little barcode up there above your head for people can click, but where can people learn more?
Oh, absolutely. So I encourage them to, well, first of all, follow me on LinkedIn and also find the ICA AI website. There's another company out there that's ICA, so don't get confused with them. We are ICA AI. And you can also find us at ica-solutions.com, which Doug just put on the screen there. Thank you, Doug. We're actually about to launch a new website. So why don't we do this exact same thing once the new website's launched, because that's actually going to have a different URL. We're going to redirect this URL to the new URL, so people won't get confused there. But actually, maybe we could do show and tell on one of these and walk through the new website, because it's got a lot of good content on it.
Well, I'm looking forward to that, and that'll be another opportunity to explain these opportunities for the MVO community and other communities as well. So, Gerry, thank you very much indeed for joining me today.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it.